Coming up on episode 190 of Creative Writing, I'm talking about how to choose your book cover.
I can't go back to sleep, it's almost light. These restless thoughts have kept me up again tonight.
Hello and welcome to Creative Writing. This is the podcast for you, an author who wants to sell more books without being smarmy. I'm your host, Kirsten Oliphant, and I'm so glad you're listening, whether it's your first or 190th time listening to the podcast. And in this week's episode, I'm going to talk all about how to choose your book cover. And there was recently a guest post by Nate Hoffelder of the Digital Reader on the blog about 4 mistakes you're making with your book cover. So I'm going to link to that in the show notes, plus a lot of cover designers I recommend or have worked with. And all that's going to be found at creativewriting.com/190 for episode 190. Neat little trick there with finding the episode show notes. I don't really have any announcements this week, so we're going to get right on into the idea of book covers. And this is such an important topic that I could talk for a long time about, but because of just everyone being at home and all that, I think I have 20 minutes, so we're going to cram it in there. My husband is on a walk with the children, and so at the end of the episode, if they get back too soon, you may hear suddenly the sound of what my life is like in my house, but we'll see if I can beat that. So go to episode, find the show notes, creativewriting.com/190 one more time just to get all the links and more. So why is it so important as a book cover? I feel like this is an area where a lot of times as authors we push back because we want our words to sell the book. But the problem is people aren't going to buy the book to see your words and read your words if the cover is not right. And it's not just about being pretty. And that's really what I want to get into, is this whole idea of what it really needs to be. So the first thing, and I think this is the most important, they're not all in order because it's too many things, but I think the most important is that people need to tell the genre at a glance. Now, and I'll link to this again, but in the post that Nate did, I linked to this really interesting study on visuals and why they matter. And it was all about, it was kind of for marketers and using branding. But one of the facts that stood out to me is that our brains process visual information in 13 milliseconds. So in less than the time it takes you to blink, you have processed a visual image. I want you to really think about that, because what we need to be thinking about is, in less than the time of a blink, can someone tell what genre your book is by the cover? And if they can't, then we really need to think about redoing your cover. And this really matters. We'll get into more and more and more about why this matters, but we're competing in a digital landscape where there are millions and millions of books on Amazon. I don't remember what the stats are for how many new books come out every month. We have people who are scrolling and we need them to stop for our book. We need them to see immediately from just a blink that our book is the right one for us. So there's a subconscious thing that is happening. Even if people don't realize it, there are subconscious signals that are sent to the brain about our book covers. And when a genre is familiar to someone, they may not know to look for certain things. They may not realize their brain is doing that, but their brain associates certain kinds of symbols, certain kinds of fonts, even certain colors with those types of genres. So most important thing, genre at a glance. You have a blink to tell people what genre your book is. Now, there are a lot of messy categories. So if you're wondering, like, how do I do that? Like when you go to Amazon and find some of these subcategories, like if you just go to Amazon and go to the romance category, that is a hot mess mix of romance, like they're all romance, but mess. You want to try to drill down and get into these smaller subcategories, and that takes some time. My episode 150 talks a little bit about niching down and looking at these things, and I have a slideshow in there, so that's creativewriting.com/150. But looking in those smaller subcategories is really helpful, but you want to be looking at other indie books. Now, I get pushback from this too sometimes because some people want to compete with the traditionally published books, and you absolutely can. Some people are actually doing that really well that I know right now. But here's the thing. They're typically doing it in a genre where that genre is clear from the covers, even in traditional books. Okay, women's fiction is a great example. This is a good time. I see a lot of indies competing with traditional books for traditional books with their indie books for women's fiction, because those covers for the traditionally published books are very clear as to what they are. And so indies are able to replicate that. There's some great designers out there, Tugboat Designs, Red Leaf Designs, Carpe Librum. I've used several of those. And I'll have links again to those in the show notes. But you can target those traditionally published books if it's easier if the genre is clear in the trad pub books too, because we know there's a lot of artistic, especially in literary fiction, you may not know. But if you can stand up against them with your cover, your style, in terms of like having quality writing, because remember those traditionally published books, they're not all amazing, but they've been through the gatekeepers. Okay. So they are going to have this extra level of editing. They're going to have an extra level of things that indies may or may not have. So can your book's writing style stand up to that? What about your blurb? Can your blurb stand up? And I've seen some terrible trad pub blurbs. So anyway, just saying that, but can it stand up to that? What about your price? Is your price priced correctly? Okay. And it might mean a little bit higher, which is good news for us, right? But the last one is really the key. The cover first is the key. The other bookend to this is, can your book stand up against it in terms of advertising dollars? Probably not. So you're going to have a whole lot less advertising. You're not going to be on shelves of bookstores and, facing outward, because those are paid spots. So you're competing like your spine if you even get into a bookstore. And so those matter. It's a lot harder to compete against those. Okay. So it is a lot better often, most of the time, in most cases, for you to be looking at other indie books, because again, the traditional published books, they have things behind them. We don't. So they can get away with having those covers that you can't tell in a blink. So just keep that in mind. The next thing that your book needs to do is it needs to convey the idea over the literal story. And this is a mistake I see people making, is they're like, well, it's got to have, this is part of the story and it has to have this red kitchen. Like I've really seen people talk about that. And people are like, we don't care about the kitchen cabinets. And I feel like there's a romance cover recently. And if this is you, I'm sorry, I'm really not meaning to make fun, but I just saw this and I was like very surprised by it, because there's this beautiful kind of beach scene in the background. And then a couple making out. There's a romance book, and then like kitchen cabinets kind of floating over the beach, because they merge the pictures together, but instead of taking out the kitchen, wanted the red or whatever cabinets. We don't care. We don't care about your cabinets. That does not sell your book to be that literal. So you don't need to be that literal. People will have problems if it's like a redhead on the cover and it's a blonde in the book. So for romance, it's hard. Stock photos, like holla to all the people who've spent hours on deposit photos trying to find something. And if you go on there and search handsome redhead, man, there are some of the worst pictures I've ever seen. I had a redheaded guy in a book and I was like, never again. Sometimes I'll reverse engineer it and actually build my characters how they look based on the stock photos, because I don't have time. And I don't have the money for a custom photo shoot, because people do that as well. So anyway, back to this main point here. Convey the idea of the book over the literal story. And people talk a lot about how they want their cover to stand out. Often this is bad, but here's how you want your cover to stand out. If you're trying to just be different or creative, you're going to struggle as an indie. That's just not going to fly, because again, there's that blink. Can they blink and tell what it is? No. If no, they're probably going to keep scrolling. Okay. Unless the cover's really gorgeous, but not even the most gorgeous covers on that thumbnail size on Amazon, they're just little. Okay. We're not making artwork here or mood posters or something. People are going to see this giant, beautiful thing. That's not how it's going to go. Now, your cover can stand out in terms of being attractive and eye-catching. Again, we want to stop people from scrolling. We want to make them click to read the blurb, to look inside, to buy the book. So it should stand out in terms of it fits within the genre, but it stands out in terms of being eye-catching and attractive, not stand out looking ugly and weird and what is this? It also should be current. And I've noticed this is not true necessarily in all genres, because I've seen some that kind of stay the same. And I don't know all genres, but as I've watched romance in the past couple of years, especially sweet romance, I've seen some shifts where certain fonts got overused. And so now they kind of look tired. And this is to me. So I don't know that readers are necessarily saying that, but I'm seeing a lot when you start to see a trend of like going from like super romantic, flowy script to a lot more handwriting kind of script. which just as a tip, a lot of the fonts I've started using, I buy off Creative Market. They're really well priced and some really unique, good cover fonts there. But you might need to freshen them up. You might want to make sure that you're not looking at covers for a book that is successful. Like there are some books that are indie published that have been selling well for years. And they don't look all that fresh, but they're still selling well for years. They either have tons of advertising dollars or they're just that unicorn book that sells and sells and sells. So just make sure you're looking at more current books. Like look at the bestseller list, but look when they're published also. You don't want to have your book look dated because then you're going to want to recover it automatically. And then another one I see people doing is trying to put too much in the title or subtitle or adding a tagline. Again, you need it to be sort of readable on a small size. And if it's not readable, because I know some of my books are not, depending on like the font and how it's placed, it should at least still give an indication of the kind of book. So I've seen people use like fonts where the pairing of the font with the type of book just looks like horror. Like I saw someone trying to use like a rom-com, but it looked like a horror font. And it was not like a cozy mystery or paranormal kind of romantic comedy. It was like contemporary romantic comedy with like horror font, and that's not going to work. So even if they can't read all of the words, it needs to be, your font needs to be kind of clear in terms of what kind of book it is. Again, add a blank. And I will say too, just a side note about this, I was listening to a podcast today and they were talking about how the subtitle needs to be on the book, and often they don't see that. I've been through this with Amazon. Now, you will always get different people at Amazon, so it's hard to be consistent, and their terms of service is a mess. But I had an issue where one of my print covers kept getting rejected, and one of the people was like, it's subtitle, because there was a subtitle, like a clean billionaire romance that was not on the cover. And then they sent me their, they have a PDF. So for print and ebook, also the terms of service are a little different. So the print one, and I'll try to find the links to these. I need to make a note to do that. In there, it actually said the subtitle doesn't have to be on the cover, but it does have to be on the title page. And so it says in the terms of service literally that the metadata has to match what's on the cover. It doesn't say it has to be present. So your title does have to be present. I think the fact that it doesn't say that your subtitle has to be present, I don't usually put my subtitles on, and I almost never put taglines on. I might put something readable like, I had bad boy books and I wanted to make sure because the guys had shirts on, but sometimes steamy books have shirts on their guys. And so I put sweet, which is a problematic term sometimes too, but we don't need to get into that whole thing. If you're a sweet romance author, you know what I'm talking about. But I will sometimes put that up there, but it's really clear and clean. I'm not as worried about the series title. That's something they will see as they kind of click and it gets bigger. But I am very concerned that the title is readable and then in my name, and then everything else, it is not really visible as a thumbnail, so it can go. Now, in one of the groups, and this is actually, I wanted to talk about this anyway, but I was spurred on because Krista, was asking a question in one of the Facebook groups, like, hey, I've been asking for feedback and I keep changing things and I'm so frustrated because I keep getting these different answers and then I'll change it and someone else is like, no, this is wrong. So I wanted to kind of address really fast, when you're asking for cover feedback, here are a couple of mistakes that people make. The first is that asking in big groups, I mean, I'm talking even like over 100 people, especially if it's a mixed genre group, like just authors. Even my group, Creative Writing, which is a fantastic group, it may not be the best place to do that because the people in that group are going to be a mix. They're going to be a mix of genres. They're going to be a mix of levels. Often there are people who have no idea, have not even published a book, or maybe publishing in another genre, or maybe really unsuccessful and all struggling, but they just want to weigh in. And sometimes even people who are really successful are not as helpful at teaching. Like there are sometimes, like they always say, those who can't do, teach, but that is not always true because sometimes there are people who have a really great eye and are really helpful for a lot of things, but they may not be publishing right now. There are some great editors who may not be writers. That doesn't mean they can't edit your book. That doesn't mean they don't understand story and structure and cadence and all these kinds of things that matter. So when you go into a large group, you don't know what you're getting. And I am going to put a link in the show notes. I have a critique group that I always get exists, and I made it part of the rules that you cannot speak. Like you can't offer feedback unless you give some qualifiers, like say, I write in this genre and sell books and this. Now, it doesn't mean you have to prove a pedigree or something, but it does mean you can't be like, I don't like this cover, because that's not helpful to anybody. Or I don't think this is a great fit. And then you're like, well, what do you write? Well, I write sci-fi. Well, this is a romance cover and you don't read this. So get on out of here. So you can speak up to those covers, but in the group, you have to say something. I don't write in this genre, or I don't read this genre, and then you can give your feedback, because it doesn't mean that those people can't help you, but it's helpful to have some context. And so I have a little bit more strict rules, because I got some irritated in some of these groups where people just weren't listening. So anyway, I'll link to that in the show notes if you want to go in. It's not a huge group. It is mixed genre, but there are some caveats I think will help. And you guys are all awesome in this community. So there really are some great knowledgeable people in the community. So get in there. But if you're trying to ask for feedback, a smaller, more specific genre group is going to be the most helpful place on Facebook. Your readers are not always going to be the best people to ask. Now, I do think it can be great to ask your readers, especially if you're torn between two covers and they're real similar, like neither one's going to break the book. You just like this one or this one, and they're both in the right style. That can help people have ownership. But your readers who are in your Facebook groups and on your email list, they're already at least a few steps closer to being super fans, if not already super fans. They're going to buy whatever you put out. I have authors, I'm like, I don't even read their blurb. They say new release or pre-order or whatever, and I just click. I'm like, I don't need the cover. I may not have the images displayed on my email. I'm like, click, y'all. So we may have those people on our list. They're not going to be the most helpful. They may tell you what they like. And that's the other thing, is that when we ask for this feedback, often people they're not reacting to the signals of that genre. They're not reacting to their blink reaction. They are stopping. They're really looking at all the elements and yeah, we should do that. But that's not how readers see it on Amazon. They blink, they scroll, it goes fast. And so you're going to get some feedback anyway that may not be helpful, but it's not really about whether we like it or not. And that is one thing I didn't put up in the list, but I'm going to add it into the show notes. It's not about whether you like it. So maybe I'll put that at the end. Will it sell, or do I like it? And I've had covers that I loved and I changed because they didn't sell very well. In fact, I'll put the examples in there, but my Supernatural Reform School series that I did with E.C. Farrell, my friend Courtney. Hey, Courtney. I liked our covers originally. I did, and they have a special place in my heart, but and they were sort of on trend. They were pretty on trend for Paranormal Academy when that was a big thing. But they weren't quite on trend. And so I'll link to who I used to redo those. T.M. Franklin, I think it's on Etsy, it's Budget. I can't remember quite the name right now. But I'll put it in the show notes. And she did a phenomenal job. Now, my original covers were like $30. So we got a deal. And that was part of the thing. We launched, and maybe I'll link to this in the show notes too. We launched in 30 days. So we had the first book out within 30 days of the idea to publish a book in 30 days. It was insane. And so I'll put a link to the show notes, how to publish a book in 30 days. Not that you want to, but just how we did it. But one of those things is we needed to get covers that were genre appropriate. And so we did as quickly as we could, but they were not perfect. They had a lot of signals for Academy, but not all of them. So I gave Tim what I wanted. And, we had this issue where our Academy didn't have a dress code. And so even though it's not about being literal, I really didn't want a schoolgirl outfit when that wasn't a part of the story at all. So I did want someone more in the urban fantasy. Anyway, there's lots of different signals that we missed, even though we got some of them right. But again, blink, how did it go? And I think these covers are much better. And I actually, without changing anything, I started to see a boost in sales just organically from changing the covers. And so it does matter. And we need to send those signals. And what we like is not as important, because I love the new covers. I do. But the old ones have a special place in my heart because they were the originals. And that doesn't matter, right? For me, my goal is the bottom dollar. My goal is where I'm trying to help pay the mortgage right now. I need the right covers to sell more books, even if that means I'm investing a little more upfront. And so I think the books were, 100 to 150 total, including the print, which is still a great price, but it's a lot more than 30, right? Now, tips to find designers, and then I'm going to leave you guys with links. And I have a feeling any minute now, my house is about to get loud because we're at 19 minutes. So tips to find designers. I'm going to leave you some of my favorites in the show notes. I've been sharing my favorites in the Quick Fix, which is my weekly email. One of the things that I do is I ask friends, I look at best-selling covers, and you can check their copyright page to see which designer they might thank, which reminds me I need to go update some of those copyright pages. I also love to lurk in design groups, cover design groups, where it's a multi-designer. Like there's lots of designers, and they're posting either pre-mades or they post covers that have sold. So you can actually get a feel for different styles, and then I'll go join their pre-made. And when I find someone who makes good pre-mades, often those pre-mades, some of my favorite covers came from pre-made groups. So my Sandover Beach series, I recovered, and I'll have links to all the ones I've recovered. My new Sandover series, which is women's fiction, they all came from pre-made groups. And often, if you find one pre-made you like, that designer will, especially if you're doing a bunch of series, like a whole bunch of books, they might even give you a discount if you're getting 5 more books. Can you match this? So I will ask, I'll say, I like this. Can you create 4 more to match? Or sometimes they'll say it in the listing. But those cover design groups are really great ways to see who you might want to hire for custom work as well. So I'll link to some of those groups. But the main thing I want you guys to remember overall is your book cover in a blink communicates way more than you realize. And so that's why it is so important. All right, I already heard the first person coming in the house yelling for mommy. So we're going to finish up. But this has been hopefully helpful for you guys. Sometimes it's hard truths. But the reality is, you guys, if you really care about your words, don't let a cover stand in the way of someone reading your book. Okay? If you hate everything about this and you're like, I can't believe people would be so not read a book because of this or that. Well, don't think of it as that way. Think of it as you just need to get them in the door, and then your words are going to keep them there. So let's get them in the door with those book covers at a blink. Okay? Very catchy, right? Okay. So again, show notes. You can go to creativewriting.com/190. I've got tons of links in there to all kinds of things you want to see. I do have a new coaching program I have talked about before. I am like a little bit backed up. So next week, the kids are going to school. My kids are going to school. I'm really excited. I might actually finish the things on my plate, possibly. But I've really been enjoying that. It's a service called Why Isn't My Book Selling? And you can go to creativewriting.com/why. But you may have a wait. I think I'm a couple weeks. I've got 3 weeks of people booked in. So yay. And it's been helpful. People have been saying that it's way more intensive than they thought, where I look at their sales page, the look inside, all the things on their sales page, and give them tips for selling more books. Okay. A big shout out to Jasmine Commerce of JasmineCommerceMusic.com for the music for this show. And if you guys want to connect with our amazing free community, you can go to creativewriting.com/community. Any more links? Can I give you more links? If I can, your brain has not turned off or you're not driving your car. If you want the emails, you can go to creativewriting.com/quickfix. And I have a new freebie I'm going to be giving you guys very soon that I'm really excited about to help you plan your book. And now it's time for you to go out and create content that you love and serve your people well.